Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Pamela Walker, the head of life sciences at Gate One and host of our Life Sciences in the Spotlight podcast series. COVID-19 has undoubtedly been a catalyst across the healthcare landscape. Last time, we discussed the positive disruption this has had in the pharma space. Today, we will be exploring the impact this has had on our own expectations as patients and consumers. I couldn't be more thrilled to be exploring this topic with one of the best and brightest founders in the fertility market, Tess Cosad, founder and CEO of Béa Fertility. Béa Fertility is a fertility tech startup focused on democratizing access to safe, affordable fertility treatment. Welcome, Tess. I'm so excited to be discussing this hot topic with you. And there has been so much movement and change in this space in the past couple of years. I would love your perspective on this trend of patients as consumers. Why do you think this is happening now? And what do you think are the drivers?
Thank you for the introduction. It's really lovely to be here. I think the trend we're seeing of patients as consumers is a deceptively important one. It's been going on for quite a long time, but really the patient as a consumer is actually reframed in a slightly different way. It's the patient taking ownership of their journey. It's the empowerment of patients as they own their healthcare and they own their health. And what this is doing is driving some very specific trends in very specific areas of healthcare. So where we are seeing the patient as consumer trend emerge most is areas of healthcare that are not necessarily a high pain point or high priority for the physician, but they are a very high pain point for the patient. So for example, acne is one of those areas. So teenage acne, not necessarily the highest priority for a physician who may have an enormous wait list of patients who are suffering from chronic and very acute conditions. But for the teenager and the family supporting the teenager who's experiencing that acne, it's a really enormous pain point for them. And that creates this sort of dissonance in the level of care required by the patient and the level of care provided by the physician. And that's creating a gap in which I think startups are really flooding into that gap. And they are bringing this ethos of patient as consumer into that. I think, why is this happening now? Well, now more than ever with pressure on healthcare systems as a result of the pandemic that we're living through, physicians and healthcare systems more generally are really having to prioritize where they spend their time. As a result, things like skincare, to a certain extent fertility as well. We've seen the NHS close all fertility clinics for the first sort of 2 months of the pandemic. So really those areas of medicine that were under extreme pressure, resource pressure during the pandemic, is where we started to see the patient as consumer trend open up markets in which startups could go in and start really creating solutions for those patients.
And so then thinking specifically, I guess, about digital in this space and in terms of those startups, how do you see this playing a role in creating that transitional patient as a consumer experience?
I think digital is everything. It's so important in that it is what delivers a unified experience. So healthcare, rightly, is siloed by specialty area, as it should be, because to specialize requires sort of deep training, deep level expertise in a very specific area of health. But really for the patient, they really only experience one healthcare journey. So a really great example of this is fertility and creating a family. In the fertility space, you will see your GP to start off the process. You might see an andrologist, you might see an REI, you might see an OBGYN, depending on diagnostics, depending on what you're dealing with, depending on where you're at in your journey to create your family. For all of those specific areas and physicians, they're dealing with a very singular point in your journey. But for you, as the prospective parent, you're going through one journey, yours. And so where I think digital comes in and plays a really significant role is unifying that delivery of care for the patient. So creating platforms where patients can own their data, they can own their care, they can log their journey, they can have that unified experience as they go through healthcare systems and go through their own healthcare journeys. I see digital as absolutely critical in delivering on that.
And so then coming back to what you mentioned earlier on, looking at the COVID-19 catalyst in this space, what do you think its direct impact has had on this patient-to-consumer shift?
I think COVID-19 has been an incredible catalyst for many things, rightly or wrongly. I mean, really, it's shone a light on how we approach healthcare systems in different countries around the world, how ready they were or in some cases weren't to handle a global pandemic, really. And I think that it's also been a catalyst in slightly different ways that maybe haven't been as apparent globally, but certainly in the startup space. It's driven an enormous amount of interest amongst the investment community in healthcare and healthcare startups and healthcare investing. And what this interest has done is drive capital into healthcare in a way that allows startups to really get the capital they need to get going and to start creating consumer-focused solutions in health. I think it's no surprise that the pandemic has driven many things into the home. We saw exercise, work, the home office, sort of so many facets of our life came home, and healthcare really is no exception to that. There was a McKinsey report that said that telehealth has seen a 38-fold uplift since pre-pandemic levels. So people are taking health into their own hands. They're taking their healthcare journeys into their hands, into their homes, and they're really starting to buy into virtual delivery and at-home care in a way that we weren't seeing before the pandemic. What this has done most critically is drive the patient's consumer trend forward at a pace that really it wasn't being driven forward at before. I think that startups have the most incredible ability to step in and provide care, and more importantly, to revolutionize the delivery of care, particularly in various pain points that are experienced by consumers in a really significant way. COVID really drove a need. It drove a desire to own health. It drove an awareness of health, and it drove a shift in the investment community towards health. And I think those can only be good things moving forwards.
I couldn't agree with you more. And Tess, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your insight and expertise with us today, specifically on a topic I think we can all really relate to at this point in time. Something to certainly watch closely over the coming months. I'm personally really excited to see the evolution in this space.
Me too, Pamela. It was great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Tess. And that draws our podcast to a close. So a big thank you to our guest today, Tess Cosad from Béa Fertility. Your perspective is certainly thought-provoking, timely, and undoubtedly meaningful.